Welcome back, guys. Today we're sitting down with Ian Harris. He is the CEO of Libero Copper. Libero is an interesting company because they wouldn't quite be called an exploration company just due to the caliber of the people involved. You know, you yourself, Ian, you're a company builder, you're a project builder. You've done this before. Your team, they've built projects before. And we have a little bit of a surprise that we're going to mention later on about someone who came into your last financing that's, a billionaire and a company builder. And so it's really exciting to see how Libero is shaping up. But the funny thing that I'm kind of stuck on that I want to discover on this chat is why did he come into this company? Because when you look at your website, when you look at what you guys have up there right now, there's nothing that would make me think, okay, a guy of this caliber is going to jump in. But I'm curious to see what you have behind the scenes. So we're going to do a little bit of digging as much as I can get out of you. We'll try to see how much you can squeeze. But first of all, I'd love to give folks a little bit of background on you. I know your background. I know you've built projects before. Like I said before we started chatting, you got to find someone who's not saying good things about Ian Harris because I haven't met him yet. What got you involved in this copper trajectory, and what's your track record in building projects?
So as background, I'm a mining engineer, right? So I'm not a geologist. I'm a mining engineer, and I've been working 25 years. 15 of those are in South America. So I've been living in South America. Actually, one of my first projects was in South America, was going to San Cristobal and starting up the mining side of that and training the teams for the startup of that project in Bolivia. And before that, actually, I was in Venezuela, in the coal mines of Venezuela. But I started my career after graduating in the management development program of ASARCO. So copper's it's my favorite metal because it's such an important metal. And then I spent also a long time in Ecuador as the senior VP and country manager for Corriente Resources, and that was a big learning experience. I say a lot of times I went in as a mining engineer to go build a mine and left with a social political know-how, right, of understanding what it really takes to advance projects across the finish line. Mirador, which sold for $690 million. It also went on to be, I stayed on after the sale as chief engineer, started the construction of that project, and it went on to be the first industrial scale mine in the history of Ecuador. And that's in the Jurassic Belt. And so that alludes to why, what was the interest in Libero? Because it's sitting in the Jurassic Belt with an asset of similar size and scale of the Mirador project, which is the closest operating copper mine. And I said, this is a time, and here's a chance to take everything that was learned of what it takes to take a project this size and scale and get it across the finish line. It's difficult, right? Because it's not the standard story that market normally understands, which is, I call it the addiction to drill results, right? And you could see projects drilling away, and you're like, this will never be a mine. So why is this happening? So I like to be personally involved in projects. A lot of restarts, a lot of builds, a lot of mine melts, even in Colombia. I like being part of projects that have the chance to become future mines, and a project of the size and scale of Mocoa in Colombia is a game changer, right? It will be a game changer for Colombia, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
And there's something really interesting that you mentioned. So you said that you love copper, and whenever I see somebody who's been in the industry for a long time and says, and has been successful at it, and says they love a specific metal or mineral, my ears perk up. But I'm like, I wonder why. And our special secret person who came in recently into Libero, he wouldn't come in if it wasn't, like you said, building a project, taking it all the way. That's the stuff. See, he's a company builder. You're a company builder. You're not there for the drill results addiction. But why copper? What is going on right now for copper? Because I know the macroeconomic space is wild with all the debt, all the printing, all the deglobalization that's going on. Gold has been going up. Precious metals, I understand. Copper, I get the supply and demand concept, but how significant is it really?
So, and it's a big part of this story, right? If you look at the short-term macros, or short-term, or that's not the right word, look at copper today, It's at a significant price. It pushed a historical high, came back off a bit, but it really, it's not the whole on the equity side. It's still not moving, right? And actually, the prices paid per pound in the ground has gone down since 2021. It went down about 25% in 2022, based on the numbers I have so far. Even like 50%, even lower in 2023. Meaning it's not hitting the equities of the developers. And this is actually probably a long story where there's been a total lack of investment in developing projects. So why do I love copper? Because if you truly believe in the supply and demand gap, it's going to be, before it's the energy transition, it's the decarbonization of the planet, it's electric vehicles, it's in electrification, it's just in global growth. And that's what I've always liked. It's always associated with the industrialization of the planet and positive advances. And that I like being part of that. I like being part of that story. And it's never been more important than now. If you believe in one of two things, whether you believe it or not, the planet is decarbonizing. It's happening, right? It's in a process of happening, and that requires copper, right? So I like to believe every single pound of copper we're not producing, every single pound that we're not getting into production is delaying that process, right? But there's another one too, right? And we're only starting to see it right now, and it's the AI race, right? It's the data center race, right?
Right.
And you have to think strategically. Right? Whoever is ahead in that race is really important. And now all of a sudden it becomes, man, we need power. We don't have enough energy to run all this AI that we need to stay ahead of the pack. And obviously the metal of electrification is copper. So you're seeing two big important drivers that make it critical, right, for what the world needs to do and where we need to go. And that's why I'm very proud it's not easy getting projects started. It's really hard. Like that gap, right, has not been bridged in the average person on this planet. Oh, you like AI? You like decarbonization? You need more copper, right? That connection really hasn't been made, right? No. So it's still extremely difficult to get a project up and running because I think the average person within our own industry doesn't even understand. They understand how to explore, or they understand how to build, but to get a project over that hump, to get it towards truly producing, I think is a special skill, and it's why it doesn't happen very often.
Well, a good example of that actually that I know about is the Madsen mine, and the reason that I bring it up is because, like you said, they got it into production, but even then they weren't doing it right. So there is a big gap in understanding how difficult it really is, not just to get it there, but to get it there the right way. So tell me a little bit more about your team. Outside of yourself, who else do you have involved in Libero?
Well, one of my closest, and I guess I'm going to say somebody who shares a very similar history, is Ernie Mast, who is a director of the company, because he was CEO of Cobre Panama when it belonged to Inmet, and he took that project all the way to getting all its permits into place. It went on, it was bought out by First Quantum, a $6 billion build, right? And became the first industrial scale mine in the history of Panama, and which is the next closest project to copper project to Mocoa, right? So we share that. I love sharing these stories and talking about, and even the way that we look at news and we hear things, the way we interpret it in trying to find out what are the root cause issues on individual projects, what can we do better. So Ernie has had a big influence on me personally, and is a great guy. He's also a metallurgist, which also brings an additional skill set to the table, right? So we have a very small board. Also with a legal and exploration history component to it on the ground. Actually, the first person, my first hire, when I joined Libero, was Tiana Alvarez, because of her background and her knowledge and our shared alignment and the way that we think what's required to get projects moving forward, and also a great geological team on the ground. And I guess I didn't say this, but I'm fluent in Spanish. I live in Medellin, and one of the reasons I love it is I get to pick the best people, independent of whether or not they speak English, right? Because many times people are forced to, I got this accountant or this accountant. Which one speaks English? This one. Take that one, right? So you're limited in talent. And so it really opens up a much larger talent pool. It allows also aligning the vision of the company a whole lot easier, right? When you're here closer to the project, right?
It's actually interesting. I one of the things that did surprise me was when I found out you're actually in Colombia, not just like visiting, but you live there. And I was like, I haven't seen that very often for people with projects in Colombia. Maybe later stage projects where they're producing, but if someone's out there trying to get something off the ground, I haven't really seen someone who actually lives, the CEO lives there. So you've got an interesting mix where you've got the public markets and you grew up over here and then you're living there where you've built projects. So that was really surprising to me.
Well, I say it a lot, and it's, a project of this scale, any project that has a significant scale, right, requires political will. And normally it's national political will. And the way to create political will is by having strength locally and also having a solid national reputation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do if you live in Canada, right? Yeah. Because I tell a lot of people that one of the first conversations of a new employee is, if you worked in this industry before, okay, now take everything you just learned and throw it out the window, right? Because if they were right, then there would be more mines, right? So the number one conclusion is most projects don't get built. So therefore, the rules of the game that we use and apply are incorrect, right? And we start very much from the beginning in terms of what our values are and what's important, right? We are not into distributing water bottles and building churches and saying, look how good we are. We are about creating real relationships on the ground, right? Integrating our community together truly on the project level. And that is what generates strength locally, which drives eventually political will. And it's not about just having pretty posts on your Instagram or LinkedIn about all the nice things that you're doing, right? And so I hate the word ESG because it's about reporting. I hate community relations because it sounds like you're trying to talk to them, right? Yeah. And it's a much deeper sense than that. What's required and that requires being here, right? And having those conversations, and it's seeing that just like a investor wants to see what I say from the horse's mouth, right? Right, a politician or a governor or a mayor or a local landowner wants to see the same thing, right? If they hear it from the horse's mouth and they know, okay, no, this is the real deal. This isn't just lip service.
So then here's my question for you. Actually, two questions. First, quick question: How much were the last companies that you've helped build? If you were to think about either in market cap or if there's a different measure that you like to value things in, what was it sitting at? Okay,
so first I'm going to take a step back and that little secret that you were talking about. One of the most exciting things I think about where we are today with Libero is I've had the luxury, right, mm-hmm. of being experienced and driving forward some of the largest projects in the world, right? Mirador today is 180,000 ton per day mine. It's one of the biggest copper mines in the world, right?
Wow.
That's big, right? That's a really big project, right? And Ernie Mass too, like he was involved in, it was the 14th biggest copper mine in the world, right? Before it was recently almost shut down, right? But we're now involved with not a project. We're involved with a person who's visionary and can see how to build companies, right? So it's a different perspective. I've always gone into a project thinking, even if you want to sell it, you need to think you're going to build it, right? Because that's how you get it sold, right? Because the market is risk adjusted. When it's hot, they buy a resource. When it's cold, sometimes they don't buy it until you're actually turning the shovel over or you've already got it into production, right? So you don't get to pick that time period. I love that. Well, we're going to get it to 5 million ounces and then we're going to sell it. I'm like, you don't get to pick when you sell it. Like, it doesn't work that way. That's not the way this market works. It's not up to you, right? But this time I feel like I'm truly involved in taking that experience and knowledge and connecting it with a vision and also a different experience of how to take that and turn it into companies. Previously, I think the biggest project I've ever been involved with was the Mirador project, and it was Corriente Resources. It did sell for $690 million, and it is a mine today. And when When we were working on a little feasibility study, it was 30,000 tons per day to be expanded to 60, and then the Chinese come in and they said, let's do it for 120, and today it's 180. So that's neat to become involved in. There's nothing neater than when you have to double your resource in 9 months and you have 9 drills running, you have 2,000 employees, and it's exciting. But also was CEO of AMAC, which was the only private mining company operator in Saudi Arabia, right? That was also a different experience in taking a 3,000 ton per day BMS project and saying, guys, you're not recovering the gold and silver, and adding that in and doing a lot of other stuff, even some smaller, like a small new mine mouth in Colombia that's only probably doing 50 tons per day, right? But it's sometimes just as difficult as some of those big projects, right? So I like that. I've been involved in restarts. I remember during COVID time period, I was an advisor to another company and helped design and build by Zoom a 200 ton per day new plant, right? So it's and I've had a lot of different experiences, and I also enjoy now the experience also involved in capital markets, right? Because I think it's been quiet for a long time, and now we're coming into a new age, and hope that all that experience, helps out a lot.
Yeah. I think that we're in a very, very unique time in the world. I think that the trends of what are going on in terms of the world powers are very unique. We've never come across this kind of dynamic. We've never had this kind of currency structure before. This is the first time we're going through this shift with a currency that's not backed by gold. And at the same time, there are other pending things that we're pushing, because part of the need for advancement, the need for the countries to grow, to survive, the competitive edge, so to say, is technology. And that needs a ton of copper. Like my neighbor the other day, he got his electric car set up, and it's the second one, and they had to redo the entire power lines because they didn't have enough power to go to his house because he has 2 cars now. And it's like, when I saw that and I just saw the infrastructure needed, and I was like, this is one guy who has 2 electric cars, and we're talking about full-on like electrification of business to business transportation. That is on a different level. That's where most of the money in transportation is. So I think it's time that we do expose our little secret. And tell me about what recently has been going on in Libero. You guys have had an interesting 2024. You've had a couple good pieces of news, including a nice financing that you guys did. But what really was special about that financing? So,
we had the luxury that Frank Giustra has come in as the largest shareholder now of the company, and not just as a shareholder, but Libero has now moved to the Fiore Group, right? So we're now a part of the Fiore Group, right? And if anybody knows Frank, right, he was very productive, a decade or two ago, right? Part of the birth of Gold Corp, and also the founding of Endeavor, right? And Silver Wheaton, and right. Founded many companies, been quiet for a while, right? But now all of a sudden he's back, right? You see him in West Red Lake, and he still is. His history is more tied to the gold sector, and gas, and maybe a little uranium. But I think what the point is that why is he back, right?
Yeah.
Why is he in copper, right? Because the guy knows markets, and the guy knows that the swing is coming back, right? And sees what's going to happen in copper. And so that's what we were alluding to. It's extremely exciting to be able to work in that type of dynamic, in that kind of vision. I'm going to be frank, right? It was a tough time, right? 2021, I think we kind of jumped the gun a little too early, because we knew it would take a lot of work to get Mocoa in a position where I was comfortable saying, let's get it moving forward, and we can talk a little bit about that, right?
Yeah.
But Frank also was a founder of RS Mining in Colombia, right? So he has the oil and gas experience in Colombia. He knows Colombia, right? And I think he said, this is something we can do something. And so it also takes it way beyond just Mocoa. That's the other thing that
That's
there's
really exciting.
it's obviously what's really exciting, right? We have an amazing team. But I want to be, the privilege of being able to work with some of the other people that I work with the experience that's very unique, right? We have a very nice share structure, and now we have visionary and the ability to attract capital to make it happen, right?
Dave.
In a time where everybody's going, copper's the future, copper's the new oil. Wow, we're just in the mountain, we're in the foothills of Everest for copper, right? You know, I've watched 3 or 4 Friedland videos, and you're like, I'm building a copper house tomorrow, right? You know, I got my neck is already thinking about the price of where copper's going to go. But today, it's not there, right? No. The equity market is not there, right? And there's a big, bifurcation between a producer and the projects. That's the other craziness, right? It's like the writing is on the wall. I think we know where it's going to go, right? And it's a land of plenty. Except for, I think even myself, I remember years ago going, man, if I had $100 million, I'd be picking up 7 different projects right now. I wish I had it. Right? I don't have it, right? And I think a lot of people are in the same space. So all of a sudden, we have all the pieces to the puzzle to really, I think, construct the next major thing, the next major player in copper. I think we really have all the ingredients, and now we're in the kitchen.
Well, like you said, with Frank, it's interesting when you look at the pattern. He's all about growth. Even the companies that he puts into production, it's not like he puts it into production and it rests. He puts into production, then he gets another asset, then another asset, then another asset, and keeps building on that momentum and keeps getting re-rated each time he gets that new asset up and running. And I was surprised to see him and hear about him in Libero and in copper, like you said, because I understand his tendency towards precious metals. I understand the momentum there. And I heard people talking about copper. But when I saw that Frank had got into it, I was like, this is interesting. Like, I haven't seen him go into copper before like this. And you guys, I think, there's maybe a few reasons he came in. One of which is that incredible team, but also just a great deal. Like when I was looking at your guys' chart, and I was looking at the timing of the market, and this is one of the things that's been very exciting for me, and why I even like the metal space right now, is because the equities are lagging so far behind the metals. Like silver went up, and it hit like $31, $32, and then equities moved like 10%. And I was like, what? How does this go on? But it's awesome if you have the patience and you can wait, because that means something is imminent, something is happening, right? And we just happen to be a little bit ahead of. I just think that I'm a little bit ahead of the curve, and that's my bet. Yeah, I mean, Frank definitely came in at a good time and at a good deal. I mean, I don't think you guys could have gotten him maybe if it was more expensive than where you're sitting at when he came in.
Yeah, I just I try not to overthink it. I hope it's because he really liked the team. I hope that was one of the big reasons. I do believe it is. That we know this is a real company. It's got a real team. It can execute. It's in a space he's comfortable with. I think he does understand the potential. Yeah. And I also say, especially in copper, I don't know when the wheels are going to fall off, but the wheels are definitely going to fall off. Right? We're on a collision course, right? And I have enough years to at least see that the speed of the market has been increasing so fast that the vision is also very short term, right? Mm. When unfortunately, from discovery to getting a mine built is 20 years, right? So I think even people today will, like, if you talk about copper price, it's like, forget that we have to build mines. Isn't even in the equation, right? Of it's, what's the demand in China? What's going on here? What's blah, blah, blah. And it's not equated in. So it's only delaying. It's not getting any better. There's no new copper mines being built. There's no new copper mines being discovered, right? The list is a very short list of the really high quality projects out there. And it's worse than 2021. Like it's unbelievable. Yeah. But we do know that cannot go on forever. Eventually, the wheels will fall off. The wheels are definitely going to fall off. I'm going to say I'm an expert on market or commodity prices, but I feel like it's starting, right? I hear a clanking and there's some sparks flying. There's some chattering, and it's gonna happen.
Well, that discrepancy alone is something that's interesting that you don't really see historically, unless there's a big when we look at the market, like specifically the metals market, like it's really, really depressed. And the funny thing about when people always say buy when others are selling, sell when others are buying, but the way that this works right now is that it's at a low, and people don't realize it's a low until you get up to the high. They're like, oh my God, that was the low back there. And so we're in a position where everything's really cheap relative to where the price of the actual commodity is. And it's just a matter of time. And that's what's kind of got me, giddy. And it's a little bit of like a, gambler's rush where you don't know when it's going to hit, but you think it's going to hit. And that's the feeling that I think a lot of people in the industry have. But with your point about copper projects, for example, some taking 10 to 20 years, what is your vision for Libero? What are you trying to do here? Why did you set out to build this copper project? Are you looking at a 20-year horizon? What is your vision?
Well, I think that if you look at Mocoa, you look at the similarities between it and the Mirador project that I was involved in the same Jurassic Belt, very similar geology. And also, Colombia is even more business friendly, right, than the times that it was in Ecuador. So I think when I first came in, this is a project I want to build, or at least do everything so even if I hand it off, it gets built, right? And that was the vision, right? I think since 2024, that vision is changing. And I'm not saying that don't want to build Mocoa. I'm not saying that that's the change. The change is that there's a bigger picture here, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good assets out there. I loved watching the charts. It was like when things got bad, everybody who had a little crappy little project, they crashed. Yeah. But then all of a sudden I looked around, and then there's like a heartbeat at a penny or whatever you want, whatever price, right? But then all of a sudden you see companies with really good assets, and they also go and they're sitting at 2 cents. You're like, what is going on here? I was like, and at the same time I've got The Economist, and it's the front page is copper the new oil. I'm like, if I went back in a time machine, right, just 15 years later, it's like, guess what? I bet you won't believe this. Companies are trading for a penny per pound in the ground, and copper's on a mainstream media front page. Like, it's such a disconnect. It's unbelievable, right? Before we the little secret nobody even wanted to talk about and to get any attention. Now the whole world thinks it's important, and we're still at a penny per pound in the ground. But I think, with all that we have involved right now, that also creates the opportunity, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times you see good assets without a team. Like they can't
it's a big difference.
And sometimes in a bad market, you can't attract the team, right? It's right. Still, you can't do it, right? And so that's why I'm so excited, because we have all the pieces, I think, really to do the amazing stuff. We have access to capital, we have the vision, we have the experience, we have the team, and that. So I think that the future is very bright for what we want to do and what we're working on behind the scenes.
Well, that brings up a couple things. I do want to push on you a little bit, because I challenge you a little bit and see what was the missing piece that you think was preventing you up to now. Let's go back, a year or 2 years. And just for context, you got started in the company how long ago?
In January of 2021.
Okay. So from there to the point that you are now in, where in July 2024, you've had a lot of changes that happened in January 2024. What was the piece that you were missing during those few years? Were you missing a piece, or it was just part of the build process?
No, I can eat crow, no problem, right? I think 2021 we as a company we jumped the gun a little bit, right? I mean, it's hard to predict what would happen in markets and how hard it would be in 2022 and 2023. And if you're looking at the very end of 2023, right, I think that we were executing properly. I think that you always expect things could be more difficult than you thought they were going to be, but you can see the impact of how things are going in the litmus test of the readiness of the project, right? And to be fair, we also didn't expect to have the significant political change that we had in Colombia. But I think we're still, the formula is working. That's the best way I can say it. Correct, right? But when you have that going on and you can't access capital, it's obviously very difficult. And so that was the missing piece, right? The missing piece was truly the ability to have the gravitas, I think is the word, but the center of gravity necessary to be able to attract the capital that the project needs. Now, I can also say that would be, what were we missing based on my previous mentality, right? But I can tell you today that the mentality of what we want to do has also changed, right? Because the conditions have changed, right? Because you say, well, all we needed was that little bit of help, that little bit of, a little bit of dry powder to keep things moving forward. And then you go, wait a second, there's 30 other projects out there that are having similar problems. That they're not bad assets. They're not bad assets. They're not bad assets, but they can't finance, right? They can't keep the engine running, right? They're on care and maintenance, right? They're desperately trying to do a raise just to pay the G&A, right? I mean, that's not the kind of position you want to be in as a company, right? And so that also creates a lot of opportunity. And I can say, though, the formula will be different than what worked in gold, right? Because obviously the size and scale of copper projects is distinct, right? But I think it is the same. It's about building. It's about building a copper company.
Well, that's really interesting, because this is the time period when things are cheaper than they should be, and the people who have access to that capital are able to take advantage of it. So basically, you're saying that up until January, or up until recently, past few months, you guys didn't have that gravitas, that access to capital. And so you were thinking from the limited mindset of, how do I just get from here to like air?
That's correct.
Right? Now you're at air, and then you're like, okay, well, now that I'm here, I have a lot more of a skill set than just survive. There's a lot more that I can do. And
that is correct.
That's awesome. Expanding the vision as you grow is fantastic. I think that's
absolutely
the only thing that's going to keep you alive as a business.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
And we have a team in place. We have the infrastructure in place. We have, we're part of the Fiore group. I obviously have a very structured team here in Colombia that can also execute. So that's also nice, right? Because that if you move after something, that you have the ability to execute on it.
Absolutely. Well, that's, it's very interesting. I think what we'll do for this video is I'll put the contact information for your team in case anybody wants to chat down below, and then they can reach out directly to your team, as well as go through the information that you guys have. But it sounds like with this transition period that you're in, if you want the real meat of what's going on, you should touch base with the team before the materials are updated, website's updated, everything's updated. So things are in progress. So if you guys want to chat with the Libero team, I'll put the link down below, as well as the phone number. And anything that you want to say to people about copper, about Libero, before we wrap it up?
I mean, I think it's just easier to synthesize, right? Mm-hmm. The opportunities exist, right? The long-term potential of copper is there, right? Libero now has a really amazing team, right? I'm talking about other people within it, right? We have an experience. We now have a vision. We now have all the pieces, all that are required. I expect this will be a story that, people will look back at it and say, what was it like, in July of 2024, right? And this is how it all started, right? So I expect big things for Libero, and I'm very happy to be a part of that story.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that this got thrown in my direction. I'm super excited I was able to chat with you, see where you guys are now, and start learning about the company now. Because I think that, it's never been a better entry point for me. So it's been great to meet you, Ian. I really appreciate your time, and this has been a pleasant conversation. I'm sure we're going to have many more.
Me too. A very enjoyable conversation. I appreciate digging in the way we did.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Cheers.